Good afternoon, guys. As you know, I've already done something today. We've got Geoff with us. We've managed to fix his camera because of a keyboard press issue, which is easy enough to do in laptops because of the weird chiclet layout. And he's just done it again out of sheer badness. How are you, Geoff?
All right, I'm alive. Been a nice few days in Aberystwyth. Were it not for the Daily Telegraph articles suddenly highlighting this town as being ridden with drug dealers, which I will be talking about. It was quite a shock. But I haven't encountered any, so things are going well on my end. How are you, John?
well, well, from the company briefing, people knows things could have been better here, but it's always a great pleasure seeing you, Geoff, and it's great fun having a chat with you. I've been looking at the news this morning. Iran's hit Israel the other week there in retaliation for some of the clear violations of international law by Israel in Gaza and Lebanon and so on and so forth, trying to protect its proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas. And this morning, the Israelis decided to fly some aircraft illegally over Jordan and Iraq, I presume, or maybe over Saudi, who the hell knows, to bomb Iran. The more things change in the Middle East, the more it stays the same. That's why, by the way, guys, if you're a civil engineer, you get a job in the Middle East, you'll get paid 5 times what you get paid pretty much anywhere else on the planet. I think it's danger money. My dad did that for a long time. I just wish he was still with us. But we used to sit and watch MiG-25s flown by the Iraqis go Mach 3 over the centre of Kuwait because, and possibly Iranian ones as well, because both sides had the Foxbat Recce plane. And used to watch the Kuwaiti Air Force frantically with their Mirage F1s trying to intercept these things. It never happened. They never even got close because you could tell the planes were really high and you could hear the supersonic bangs as they flicked away in a great big circuit over Kuwait Bay. And the reason we're going there is because Iraq's armour that they were getting from China and Russia was unloaded at the port in Kuwait and was then driven up through Kuwait. And I'm sure the Kuwaitis would deny it, but I saw it with my own eyes, so did Dad. And even with his magic security pass, because of the job he did, we couldn't go anywhere when that was happening. You weren't allowed anywhere near it. And so, it's a joke. Israel really needs to grow up and realise that if it lives and let lives and gives people what it claims to, which is a democratic vote, they won't have the problems that they've got. I said right at the beginning of Gaza, this was going to be another Stalingrad. The Israelis have been stuck in Gaza for over a year. And they still haven't done what they set out to do. Reasonably speaking, the German Sixth Army took Stalingrad in 6 weeks. If it hadn't been for the collapse in the flanks, they would have got across the river eventually. So, is it not time that the West pulls the plug on the overt support for what, in my view, is a genocidal war?
Oh, my only quibble is that Iran was panicking over the Abraham Accords. And let's keep in mind that Israel, for everything that's going on in Gaza, is not inflicting genocide on Egypt or Jordan. There you got peace. And Iran panicked over these accords and then decided to tell Hamas, go kill as many Jews as you can in the most humiliating and unpleasant manner possible. That's going to push the buttons of a lot of decent Israelis as well as the genocidal right-wing ones. The guy that masterminded the October 7 attacks, I think that is a win for the Israelis. I do sometimes think someone should really say to Iran, just accept that, well, accept that Israel exists and stop poking the dragon, as it were. Because I have a feeling the Israelis are very close to bombing Iranian oil facilities. If you do that, then the regime, which does like hanging gays from cranes and stuff, that regime will start to crumble. Young people are sick of Iran. The thing is, if you can just get rid of Iran's funding of proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas, then sympathy for the Palestinians will grow because the Palestinians just won't have rockets to fire at the Israelis. And then you can start getting sanctions on those Israeli settlers that want to kick out Palestinians and take their land because it's God's will, etc., 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 etc. You've heard that bullshit before.
Well,
So
hold on a minute here.
Yeah.
According
Yep.
to multiple UN resolutions, every single settlement in the West Bank is illegal. The Israeli
It needs to be
government,
made illegal then.
the Israeli government has repeatedly forced people off their land, and if they refuse to go, people die.
Yep.
That's not bullshit. That's fact. And
Oh yes, yeah. No, I'm not saying it's not happening. I'm saying that them saying it's God's will, that is bullshit. That's what I'm trying to say.
yeah,
That is
of course
happening.
it is. It's the problem is Israel is not a secular state. And they don't have a fair electoral system that gives residents who they have, for whatever reason, decided, usually on religious grounds, to deny citizenship to vote. So they hide behind a fig leaf, in my view, of democracy, whilst persecuting people. Now, I make no bones about this. Before, this is not a monetized post. We aren't big enough for that. But before it gets pulled down because of my view here, there's a really important thing to understand. The Palestinian attacks, the Arab attacks in Israel, for much the same reasons, are unacceptable. But there's a big difference between what in Europe would have been called a partisan war, realistically speaking, and a full-blown proper military. Partisan war is always dirty. It's always horrible. If you look into what happened behind the lines, behind Nazi lines in the Soviet Union, it wasn't pleasant. The partisans were just as dirty, just as nasty as the Nazis, albeit in retaliation for the most part for Nazi atrocities. If you look in what used to be Yugoslavia, I've just done a game in that. It's brutal, guys. You know, I need to pull the file up, but I've got something like 16 different partisan organizations. I've got multiple puppet governments. I've got all kinds of stuff going on. I've got players can control partisans. Both players can control partisans. Why? Because nobody liked anybody, and the whole thing was an absolute horror show. It was so bad that the SS Police Führer for Croatia wanted to remove the Croatian government. Hitler said no, because he quite liked the chaos. You can read into that what you will. A guy, by the way, who went to Eastern Europe and was heavily involved in the final solution, thought what was going on in the Balkans was actually beyond the pale. That's really hard to comprehend. That's partisan war. I'm sorry, it's always horrible. And what we've got is an Israeli military trying to do what the Germans did, which is through essentially mass repression to get rid of a partisan problem. But the partisan problem is largely created by Israeli policy. If you've got a family, Geoff, right? If you imagine your wife and kids and you've got a farm and you're forced off your farm and you're killed protesting it, and your kids are maybe 16 and 17, 18, something like that, what are they going to think? Are they going to think, oh, that's okay, Dad, it was an accident? Or are they going to think, wait a minute?
Kalashnikov.
Yeah.
They'll get some Semtex.
Yeah, that's the problem. Right there in a nutshell. And it's been that for decades. And if you go and dig into why Britain got the hell out of Palestine in 1947, it's not because of the Arabs. It's because of the Israeli terrorism, the bombing of the King David Hotel, and so on and so forth. We then made friends with the Israelis because we wanted Suez back. And we backed down from that. Because the US wanted to, I don't know, do a deal with the Egyptians or some such. Possibly they tried to keep Egypt out of Soviet hands. That failed. because the Egyptian government at the time was basically non-aligned, but was clearly supported heavily by the Soviet Union. They built the Aswan Dam, for example, when no one else would do it. Whether or not it was a good idea is not the point. The point is they were a client state for a long time. And if you take a look at what equipped the Israelis and what equipped the Arabs during the various Arab-Israeli wars in 67 and 73, you'll find that it was French, British, and American equipment that the Israelis had, and the Arabs generally, their more modern stuff was Soviet. But the key thing is the Israelis won. And there was a case we made, particularly 73, was a justifiable war. 67 was as well, because there's clear evidence that the Arabs were going to go after them. But we got out because we basically couldn't handle the problem. We had a partisan war we could not win. There's a lesson there. There's a lesson we've forgotten about. That is where that's going on. Either get the hell out or do the job right. And we're not doing the job right. There's another news story I picked up on. The time has come for reparations dialogue, according to Commonwealth heads, and according to some UN thing, Britain owes £18 trillion in reparations for slavery.
18 trillion.
To put that in perspective, fighting 2 world wars cost us $2 trillion. Dollars,
The
not
British
pounds.
economy the British economy right now is worth 3 trillion. So 18 trillion, that's the entire economy paid for 6 years.
Yeah. That's not going to happen. Sir Keir Starmer, Mr. U-turn himself, is currently stating, it's very clear, that the UK will not pay reparations. So let me make clear, guys. Every single major power on the planet was involved in the slave trade. Greece, in ancient Greece, the Roman Empire, almost every African state, the whole of the Islamic community, the entirety of the US on the East Coast, from the north to the south, the Caribbean islands, run by Britain, run by Holland, run by France, run by Spain, run by Portugal. Everywhere used this. That, unfortunately, incorrectly and disgustingly was the norm. That's not right. No one should be enslaved. I make some games. I read about slave labour in Europe in the Second World War. Geoff and I have been reading about it in the First World War. It's appalling. It's an absolute outrage. There's claims that it's going on right now in China, the Uyghur Muslims being enslaved. There are sanctions against companies in certain areas of China who are perceived to be using that right now from the US, from Britain, from the European Union. There are modern slavery rules, regulations and laws. But the first country on this planet to ban slavery was the United Kingdom. And during the Napoleonic Wars, we diverted naval assets to stop slavery. There are strong cases to be made that the 1812 war with the USA was largely provoked by the anti-slavery patrols and British ships stopping and searching US-flagged vessels to, how shall I put it, recover British nationals from them who should be serving in the Royal Navy. Those two things in that order caused that war. Yes, British hulls carried a lot of slaves. So did Dutch, so did French, so did American, so did Spanish hulls. We stopped it. We pressurized people. The United States fought a civil war to liberate slaves and to ban it in the USA. Everybody has a right to freedom and freedom of speech. We have a right to religious expression. We have a right to believe what we want to believe, as long as we don't impose it in a hostile fashion on others. Why should we pay for something that we stopped? I don't understand it. And when you go and dig into this terrible trade, it's an obscene trade. We're told it was only people of colour. Well, can I tell you something? We all bleed red. We're all the same colour on the inside. But if you want to use skin, it's a disgusting way to tell the difference between two human beings as the defining factor in whether or not someone was enslaved. You might want to go do some digging into how many slaves, white slaves, the Ottomans had, the Arabs had along the North African coast, the caliphates had. And you might find some really terrifying numbers which completely changed the perspective of it. Because my research done through places on the internet, I haven't bought books yet. One day I will. Probably once I've finished making war games, because to be honest with you, this needs to be publicised. More white people were in slavery in any given day than there ever were black people under in slavery to whites. Black people say they're offended. They're right to be. I can understand that. I can understand there's a cultural hangover from it, just as there is with the Holocaust, just as there is with General Pan East, just as there is with the fear that Putin has, rightly or wrongly, about fascism. I really get that. But I'm offended. I'm horrified. And I believe that the entire Islamic world, if we have to pay reparations, they should be paying reparations. It's not going to happen. There shouldn't be an apology. There should be an explanation that, yes, it was wrong. We went and we changed it. Until we do that, Geoff, we are still, no matter what, going to be told that no matter what we do, we're wrong.
Well,
that's my view.
To jump on that straight away, the one thing that has increasingly disappointed me about a lot of this, well, there are quite a few things, but there's one thing pertinent to this right now. I do not like it when certain members of our political class say, we did X, it was wrong, we should apologize, we'll give reparations. Note the article should. And then they spend the next 20 to 30 years telling people this. And they create a clientele of people that begin to feel that should happen. And then having put white kids in inner city schools, age 5, put a rope around their neck, walk them around a school, and tell them that's what it's like to be a slave. And when you're 5 years old, you know, you want to know if Thomas the Tank Engine could beat Edward in a race. You do not care, and you shouldn't care, about the demographics of the Sugar Islands and whether you're responsible. I mean, it's just insane.
Yep.
Certain parts of our elite have conspired to wither our confidence and self-esteem. So I've got to the point where seeing Starmer, and he was surrounded by these Caribbean dignitaries. There's this photo of him almost looking under siege by them. And I thought, well, I'm sorry, mate, that's chickens come home to roost. And I think some people in the elite should go out and systematically work out not just slavery, I mean, we've already apologized for slavery. I should point out Tony Blair did that about 20 years ago, and they're still asking for that. But find every single thing that the woke elites feel bad about and start working out if they can do something about it. But the price of that is they never, ever tell the people living in Britain that they carry personal responsibility for what has happened.
Yeah, I mean,
they need to leave and not come back until they've sated their consciences, and they never speak about it ever again. Because there's one other thing, the most disgusting element of this. In Rotherham and Rochdale, we did have a period where certain grooming gangs, who were probably kicked out of Pakistan because they were seen as beyond the pale over there, they did start molesting ladies, young girls. And what basically happened was certain parts of the police and government looked away because they didn't want to be racist. And this, people might want to sit down before I say this, I see that as essentially a colonialist atrocity upon the native peoples, because the people that lived here were treated very badly. And while we have good colonists that come here, I see immigration as a form of colonization. There are people from Kerala and Pakistan and West Africa that come here and do good work. These specific groups of people came over and did all this stuff, and the left, out of a desire to atone for empire, allowed those girls to be raped. No. No. I do not care if apologies are right or wrong at this point. The left just go and do them and do not bother us. It is that damn simple. And we are owed an apology and reparations from the elite on to go to the people that were abused in that manner. End of conversation. I will not back down on that.
I get that, and I think nowadays there seems to be this. I would say not necessarily woke. I don't believe in that. I don't like labels, but there seems to be this lack of willingness for people to discuss awkward problems and actually say, right, instead of being offended and hurt and crying about it, what do we do to fix it? Now, we can't fix the past, but we can ensure that problems of certain types never happen again. We don't want another global war, but we're sliding towards one. We have a marginal stalemate with a progressive and very slow Russian advance into Ukraine. A country that's lost between 9 and 12 million of its 40 plus million people, with a military that's gone from, let's say, semi-professional to mass conscription. If you're 16 to 60 now, you've got to serve. That's changed dramatically in the last year or so. They've expanded their conscription. Guys, you might want to take a look at that and actually look at what happened in Nazi Germany when it was collapsing in 1943 and 44. The conscription range expanded exponentially, and by 1945, essentially, if you're male and had a pulse, you were given a rifle. The same thing's happening there. There will be a collapse. I don't think it'll be Russia that collapses. But the scary thing is, some of Russia's putative allies appear to be pumping troops in. Very few, admittedly, to begin with rumours, presumably fairly strong rumours that wouldn't be in our press, that North Korea is sending troops. And then you've got the insanity of South Korea wanting to send troops. Yes, both are sovereign countries. I'm not that surprised that North Korea has offered to do something, probably to get their back scratched by the Russians. I really can understand that from their perspective. Maybe it gets them some oil and some food or some medicine or whatever, I don't know. Because we keep hearing North Korea's economy is in a bit of a mess. But I now have a concern that we're going to have South Korean troops fighting against Russians, possibly never coming across their North Korean opponents that they want to fight. And that's going to cause Russia to get very annoyed and intervene in the Pacific against, presumably, as you'd see it, depending on the propaganda that was put out, maybe another spurious bunch of claims about fascism and all that. It's an escalation on a grand scale. We could end up with a slide to a regional conflict, a dangerous regional conflict in the Pacific. We have a Labour government that's claiming a black hole in our finances here, which is even bigger on a daily basis. It's gone from a few billion to 20 billion to, I think the latest number is over 40 billion. Guys, go do some research yourselves. I've done it in the past. I wrote essays about this at uni when I did some history, economic history there. Every time the UK gets a socialist government, there's a flight of capital. It's not people like you and I. It's very wealthy individuals, major corporations and so on. Simply put, don't trust Labour. So they pull their money out. When you pull barrel loads of money out, it creates a black hole in the exchequer. So Labour automatically either has to be more conservative with small c, and therefore more, I think the word you might want to use is Thatcherian in monetarist policy, or they have to raise taxes. And what we're about to get, from what I understand from Rachel Reeves, our Chancellor here, is a hammering of the ability to recruit staff by murdering businesses who pay PAYE salaries. They're going to increase what we call national insurance in America, the social security payment the employers make on your behalf. The actual percentage increase is not huge on a bit of paper, but when you consider if it's 1.5% right now, you put it to 3%, you've actually doubled it. So it's a 100% rise. We're looking at major costs in an economy that's already struggling, an economy that's shorter workers, an economy that's in borderline recession, borderline growth, in other words, it's stagnant, an economy that's suffering from the enormous 30 to 68% hit, depending on what businesses did, as a result of Brexit. And you've got a government that's about taxes to death. I have cars. I've got a house. I've got a business. I'm exposed to all these tax changes. Guys, shouldn't do it. I smoke. I've been known to have a pint. Well, a spirit. I fully expect tobacco to go up. I fully expect alcohol of all types to be whacked up. I fully expect that fuel tax is going to be put back on the carbon accelerator that the people in Tony Blair's government put in. It's actually been taken off that since Gordon Brown was the Prime Minister, for the most part. It's slowed down the price of fuel rises. And we already know that in America, people complain about $3 or $4 a gallon, right? We're paying, £1.50, just under $2 a litre right now. And most of that's carbon tax. There's a low-hanging fruit if you're a car owner. It's a really easy low-hanging fruit. By the way, if you buy a car over £40,000, or if you buy a second-hand car that was already over £40,000, there's a wealth tax in what we call a road fund licence. So that's your DOT stamp or whatever it is you need to get to make sure your car's safe and is registered to drive it on the roads in the US. Right? So we get taxed at £400 if you buy a car over 40 grand. Go on to Ford's website, go on to Vauxhall's website, go on to Peugeot's website, and see how many cars which are a moderate size or bigger that you can buy, even from the volume producers. We're not talking about buying a Ferrari, we're not talking about buying an Aston Martin or a Jaguar or a Land Rover or whatever. They're all expensive cars. We're talking about bog standard cars. Go to Volkswagen's website and take a look at the price of a Passat if you can still buy one. Most family cars are above that. Families can't afford a £400, £500 a year wealth tax on a car, which frankly is not some accelerating, massively fast vehicle. But I'll tell you who can, and I guarantee, because Labour's wealth tax plans are designed not to hit the working man. Wherever the working man is. Geoff's a working man. I'm a working man. Most of the people are going to view this as a working man. Yeah, you've been on to work, Geoff. I know you have. We were talking about that just before we came on here. Yeah, look at that face on him. He'd rather be drinking orange juice and getting drunk. That's all it is. But I'm ranting about this because one of my friends bought a Nissan Leaf. Sounds like a good guy. He was a lovely guy. And what he did was he put his hand straight down the options list because he could afford it. It's just over 40k, just over 40 grand. I checked. Sorry, Sal, if you're watching this. I was a bit nosy. So guess what? His electric car gets tax breaks. The price of electricity in Britain is high enough that it's actually the same price or dearer to fill your car up with electricity without government subsidy than it would be to put petrol or diesel in it. So I've got a proposal for Rachel Reeves' tax-raising government budget right now. I can almost guarantee the road fund licence discount, which is down to zero on most electric cars, will be removed. After all, an electric car rolls along the same road that your petrol or diesel or hybrid or whatever the hell it is you've got does. Still creates potholes, still needs infrastructure. The next thing is they will almost certainly put a de-escalator on the subsidy for electricity and far beyond time. As it is in the UK, the government has withdrawn, under the Tory government, rightly so, all support for electric infrastructure, on the basis that the carbon cost of that, plus the generation and the construction and then disposal, particularly of the battery packs in electric cars, is actually worse for the environment than most petrol or diesel vehicles. You can go do research into that. Again, I'm probably going to get thrown off Facebook and whatever else for putting this up. But the bottom line is, I have had enough of getting lied to. When you go through, Volvo had a thing. Buy a car that's electric. It'll save the planet. And you read it, and there was an asterisk. You have to change the battery pack every 60,000 miles. And I worked out the car had to go something like 300,000 miles before you were carbon neutral in relation to buying the same vehicle with a 2-litre diesel in it. Most cars in the UK are scrapped at less than 150,000 miles. What the hell is going on?
How do you really feel, John?
Well, really happy, right? You know, it's ridiculous. It's farcical.
Yeah.
About 9-10 months ago, I read an article. I forgot to rant about this before. The British government, under the Tories, were going to pump money into defence. They were going to increase defence expenditure from 2.1% of GDP, which is actually 2.1% of tax revenue, to 2.5%. As a percentage increase, that's quite big. It's about a 40% increase in expenditure or 30% increase in expenditure. I get that. Far beyond time. Ignoring the fact that in 1933, we were at 2.5%. Ignoring the fact that in 1939, we were at 8%. And that was without a major war outside of the Spanish Civil War, which was not a war between two large nations. It was an internal war, albeit with external proxies involved. We knew it was coming. We have a war in Europe for the first time since 1945 between two major countries. One of them is a global superpower. That country is led by a man who appears to be a gambler, who may be gambling for much the same reason Hitler did. Hey, I'm getting on a bit. I need to make my stamp now, or I'm never going to do it. So the government went to people and they said, what do we need? And the Navy in particular said, we've got the longest lead time out of the whole lot. I mean, you can order Typhoons off the production line, you'll get them in a year's time, 2 years' time. If we want to build a ship, it's going to take between 2 and 4 years, just as it always has. So the government went to our 2 remaining shipbuilders. I love the conspiracy theories that talk about the military-industrial complex. You know, Britain used to have one. We don't now. We have 2 companies, Babcock's and BAE Systems, can build ships. 2 companies. And they went and they said, can you take an order to double the number of frigates being ordered? The answer was no, we have no productive capacity to do so. That is not top secret. That's been on the news and the BBC. Now, once upon a time, a British company that was asked to double an order would have said, we'd love to, but we need some land so you can build more ways for the ships. They'd have expanded their business. They'd have added it on. They'd have started building in parallel. They'd maybe laid down 2 ships side by side the way the US did in ways. What we now have is a government that accepts that we can't build stuff that we need, an industry that refuses to invest. Despite a potential order to either BAE Systems, which used to be Yarrows on the Clyde, or to Babcock's over at Rosyth for, I think it would have been 12 frigates. 6 more of the higher quality on the Type 26, and I think 6 more Type 31s or whatever it is. And they were essentially told, "Nah, we're not going to do that. We can't do it. We don't have the ability to do that anymore." This isn't just crap procurement. This isn't just the CVAO1 argument with the Labour government when Labour claimed there was only four aircraft carriers that would be ordering. It wasn't. 4 carriers, the air groups, all the support stuff, and 8 air defence ships, which made the deal look really bloody good when you actually get right down to it. It wasn't the farcical refusal to buy US carrier technology and learn how to build them, build 3 here and build 1 in America, which again included the air groups and the support costs. It's got nothing to do with that, this. What it is that Geoff hit the nail on the head. It's a total lack of confidence in this country's ability to do anything. Guys, I can't even get somebody who can put some ink on a sheet of bloody cardboard and not screw it up. I get that printing's an art form, but it's not that difficult. If you can't read an instruction in a contract, if you can't understand something, and if somebody who's been working with me for 10 or 12 years can't get that right, we're in a pretty sorry state when we go and try buy something complicated, you know, like, I don't know. I have no idea what's more complicated than a bit of paper with some ink on it. Pretty much anything you can think of. We don't have the confidence to do the job right in this country. We should do. We've brilliant people. I need to get a full list of the inventions this country came up with, but your tarmac road outside your house is a British invention. The telephone that you speak to that's on a landline is a British invention. The TV picture you're looking at right now, doesn't matter if it's a CRT or an LCD, all comes from British technology originally. The computer you're using, the idea of programming it, was designed by a guy called Alan Turing. It's a British invention. You're on the internet, you're looking at this on YouTube, you're looking at this on Facebook or wherever else you downloaded this from that we put up on. Guess what? The domestic internet, the internet you guys go on www. whatever it is you want to see, that is a British invention. The mass production of penicillin is a British invention. The internal combustion engine that's lean burn was developed at the University of Strathclyde on behalf of Ford Motor Group. The number of things that you use on a daily basis, whether it's the steam railway, the electric railway, whether it's hydrogen fuel cell stuff, that's a British invention in the 1860s, would you believe? Whether it's certain types of sodium flare light bulbs, whether it's computers, laser discs, in other words, DVDs and CDs and whatever else, Blu-rays. That technology was a British guy who couldn't get money in this country, and Philips and Sony gave him the money. The number of things that we've developed, the jet engine. So the next time you go on holiday, it doesn't matter if it's a turboprop aircraft or an Airbus 380. The engine that's in that is developed from Frank Whittle, who beat Heinkel to a functioning engine. So you can't fly without using technology developed here in the UK. Microwave radar, which controls your plane's approach to its destination, which hopefully gives you warning if some idiot tries to attack your country, is a British invention. I'm not getting into all the military stuff. We did a lot there as well. But we're in a position in this country where we can't even buy basic stuff we need to protect ourselves because government won't promote enterprise. And we're terrified to put people's bodies on the line. I've read books. I've watched TV programs done by talking head historians. People you will have heard of, Anthony Beaver, all these guys. And they say, oh yeah, well, you know, we're useless. Really? We fought a world war against Spain, we won. We fought a world war against France 3 times, we beat them 3 times. We fought 2 world wars against the Germans, we won. Yes, we had allies. Yes, we had help. What changed? What changed is Britain's move in 1914 from being a maritime power which dominated global trade to a continental power that lost 1 million soldiers in what all too many people think of as a pointless, bloody and brutal campaign. By 1940, Winston Churchill and his predecessor Chamberlain and his coalition government were saying we will not recruit soldiers. We will not put people in the line to fight Nazism. That failure to do it was because of a terror that more people would die. And it could be argued that our failure to do that, our failure to even take our colonial troops and trust them to fight, people who wanted to fight, people who volunteered to fight for us, meant that a war went on longer than it needed to and more people died. We've lost confidence in our own ability. Britain is the 4th or the 5th or the 6th biggest economy on the planet, depends how you add it up. But we can't buy a bloody ship that works. We can't build a cross-Clyde ferry at the price it was contracted at. It's a humiliation for this country. At one point, about 15% of the world's ships were built in the River Clyde. 35% of the world's steam locomotives were built in Glasgow. And now we can't build a bloody ferry. Just so you know, the first one in service now broken down. They can't get spares for it. It's out of service again. It's on the news the other day. Things about 7 or 8 years late, it's something like 10 times budget. It is staggering, the incompetence I see in our government. I'm Scottish. I have a devolved parliament. I've got a parliament here where we've got various socialist parties who all sit there and buttermilk their mouths and they, oh, we're going to be great for you guys. You know what? It takes weeks to get medical appointments. You've got to pay through the nose for appallingly poor dentistry. The roads are falling apart. The council's run by nut jobs who can't even tell me the right amount of money to pay for local tax. And when you do pay it, they don't track it, and you get hassle from them. I've been told...
I'd like to interject very quickly. I received a phone call Friday. Actually, no, Thursday, and I was... This nice young lady rang me. I thought, oh, who is this? This is a cold call. Came from a private number, and it was from the local council. And they said, just checking, you're in the you're this guy that lives in the property. Yeah, that's my name. That's fine. Whoops, forgot to send the letter. My incompetence. Sorry about that. And then she said, and she gave the name of the previous guy that had been in this house. And I thought, wait a minute. No. He isn't living here. So obviously he'd not taken his name off the register. And I'm thinking, but wait a minute. I've been saying I live here. I've been saying I'm the only person living here, and I've been here for 2 years. I've had 3 of those fancy "say you vote here" letters, and I began to wonder, how could the council not have noticed that?
I have no idea. It's beyond belief. I actually need to do one for Julie here. I've forgotten to do it. That's on my to-do list. Normally that works. It should be automated. You go on a website, you do it, updates the voters roll, and job done. But we're back to total incompetence. You know, I can rant on. Labour government, £20 billion black hole. How much money have they spent paying their union paymasters members in additional pay rises? The average pay rise dished out is about 40%, guys. That's train drivers, it's nurses, it's not the cleaning staff, by the way, it's not the care assistants, it's doctors. Junior doctors went from 65k to over 100 grand overnight. There's a lot of junior doctors. There's a lot of nurses getting huge pay rises, lots of train drivers, bus drivers, and so on. And yet, I'm reading right now that Unite is going to pull out bus drivers in Scotland on strike, but get another 35% pay rise. What the hell is that about? I'm reading that our wonderful Green politicians in Scotland are about to pool support for what they're trying to do here to give old folks care, the National Care Service, because they don't agree with it because for some reason it's not great. The Scottish Government has just given the shipyard that couldn't build a ferry for 7 years at contract price another contract to build small ferries. Have they lost their entire marbles? There's more. There's always more. It's a litany of stupidity. We need to ban wood-burning stoves in all our towns. They churn out pollutants at a greater rate than coal did, and the Clean Air Act is the only reason our cities are not choked with coal fumes. They're pausing that. It was a great idea. That's the first step, usually, of British government saying, let's get rid of that great idea. In September, in this country, kids in Scotland who had little money because their parents are hard up had their right to a free school meal removed. They're now going to means test it. So if your mum or your dad earns a penny more than a fairly small amount, they're going to lose a school meal. If that parent is not well, can't work, how are those kids going to get any kind of sustenance? We live in a country now, Geoff and I, where OAPs that earn about £15,000 a year or more are no longer entitled to something called the winter fuel payment. My mum got that. My mum would not have got it under this Labour plan. She would not have been able to afford her energy bill. I had to pay it anyway, even with that. People are going to die because of a socialist government that will not understand that the problems are not giving a few thousand OAPs 400 quid a year to heat their homes. The problem is the massive amount of money we waste through appalling recruitment policies where you can't get rid of incompetence. Geoff's situation with telling the council who lives where is exactly the sort of nonsense I'm talking about. It's government departments that refuse point blank to procure stuff in a common sense fashion. The point of our National Health Service, as well as being free when you get into trouble, when you need it, is that instead of your local hospital buying maybe for 50 patients or 1,000 patients, it's the whole of the UK buys stuff. So you buy bulk, it's always cheaper. If you don't believe me, go to cash and carry and then go to your supermarket. That's how it works, guys. Instead, we're paying more. We're paying for services. And one thing I will say, Keir Starmer did get it right. The NHS is broke. The NHS is hugely, grossly and obscenely overfunded. It's a jobs for the boys thing, and it needs to be restructured. I can now reveal that about 15 years ago I was asked to look at it. And oddly enough, the unions that howled the most were not Unison and Unite. It wasn't the ultra left-wing unions. It was the British Medical Association, the Royal College of Nurses, and they said any change, we're out on strike. I didn't get the job, guys, because the government didn't like the fact I was going to have to pay out quite a lot of money. Amusingly enough, I would have been about £28,000 a day, my team that I put together. Quite a big team. I'm sure you can appreciate looking at something the size of the health service is not free. 5 years later, they hired a major global, well-known management consultancy at £3 million a day for 12 people. Apparently that was value for money.
Treasury brain, as they call it.
No idea. I've been told by all sorts of people I should go into politics. I've got an interesting personal life back in the day. I don't want to do it. I don't want that shit. I don't want people complaining. Between you and me, I could care less if Boris Johnson was doing something naughty under the desk with his secretary halfway through Brexit or COVID or what. I don't give a shit. If the guy did his job right, I don't care. I'm not interested in whatever a president got up to in the Oval Office with an intern. Did he do a good job as president? Yes or no? What I'm interested in, though, is trying to highlight through these videos from time to time, because it's going to happen every now and then, some of the stupidity I see on a daily basis. Some of the injustice being inflicted on the poor in our country. I'm sure Geoff could rant on more. We're kind of out of time. We're actually over. Try and do this for an hour rather than like 3 hours. But we could do this for the next 10 years with this. The Scottish Government has got a thing called the A9 dualling project. My dad was a civil engineer. I've got a degree in construction engineering. My degree's more houses, his was highways. He would tell you that it takes 2 years to design it and 2 years to build it. It's a 4-year project to do anything. It's big. The A9 should have been dualled by 2025. It's now 2035. Partly that's Brexit, guys. We've got no money. Because the Regional Development Fund used to help places like Scotland and Wales do major infrastructural projects to help the communities in rural and disenfranchised areas. If you walk out from my house to the community centre at the top of the road there, where I now go to vote, you'll find something very interesting. 33% of that was paid for the EU. If you drive from here down to Edinburgh, you have to cross something called the Queensferry Crossing. 33% of that's paid for by the EU. The A9 was meant to be 33% funded by the EU. Guess what? It's not now. That's why it's late. That's why it's actually costing 5 or 6 times what it should have. Because the longer you delay these projects, inflation does affect the cost. So the real world cost is probably about the same. Because the spending power of the money in Europe, the dollar, the euro, the pound, the yen, the yuan, the whatever bloody currency you've got, decreases over time because of inflation. In general. So my granny used to go with my granda to the cinema for 1 and 6pence, about 16p, and they get 10 players, bag of chips, tram to and from, and two tickets for the cinema. You can't buy 10 packs of fags anymore, so you're 15 quid for a packet of fags, you're about 10 quid each for the bloody cinema ticket, and you're probably 15 quid for the bag for whatever crap you eat at the cinema. It's called inflation. Yeah. My parents bought their first house for under 1,500 quid. That house is now worth 300 grand. That's all it is. It's inflation. But because of the way governments represent themselves, we end up paying huge amounts more than we should for almost every project. You want a hospital built, they can't even clean out the ventilation system before they turn it on. So they kill people just through total stupidity. I'm an engineer. I really was pretty good at services. I look at that and I cringe. The chartered engineer responsible should have been fired and jailed. The politicians who told this guy to turn it on should have been arraigned and done for corporate manslaughter. Because that's what would happen to me in the private sector if I was in that job. Because it's a government project, it doesn't happen. It's one rule for them, one rule for the rest. We cannot go on. I'm sure those of you in Portugal or Spain or Italy or France or Germany or the USA or Canada or Australia or New Zealand or Japan will tell in the comments below, Jesus, John, didn't know it was that bad, but Christ, you want to see this. I've got friends in Portugal where they dug up a road and then they stopped working on it and they said it'll take 3 years to to quite literally resurface 100 yards of road. 3 years. Now, we're bad, but we're not that bad. Thank God. time for us to go. It's been a great rant. We're going to rant again. Next time you see Geoff and I, we'll probably try and talk about games because it's less contentious. We're not going to get thrown off the internet. We're not going to get you guys all upset. If you're pissed off, I'm really sorry. But actually, at the same time, it's good for you to be offended. It might get you to go and look stuff up. It might get you to actually take a view, find out the facts behind some of these things, and say to us, well, actually, there's a good reason for that. Well, is there? I don't think there's a very good reason for a lot of the stuff Geoff and I have spoken about. We need to do better. I know my company's struggling. I've been ill. Family bereavements, all that stuff. Geoff's not had his problems to see. Corey's not been well. Knee surgery and all that. Our very good friend and colleague Andrew's been extremely ill recently. I'm not going to get into that. That's for him and I to have a chat, and we'll maybe disclose some of it. He's a lot better. I've been phoning to him every day for about a week, trying to make sure he's all right. So I think you can work out it's pretty serious, because we don't normally talk every day. Times are tough. We love the support. Thank you all so much. Without that, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't doing these videos. We wouldn't be talking about these things. We wouldn't have these games coming out just as soon as possible. We would not be in a position for Geoff and I to do the research we do, to rant on about stuff. So please keep watching the videos. Please keep buying the games. Please keep being positive. Please understand we're doing the best we can. Have a great one.
And if at any point you want to take part in this, if you feel that you could put together an OB for something, or you want to do a bit of marketing, please contact us. Yep. We're at the point where, I've been talking to John. He's been dealing with putting stuff in boxes, and it's not fun. Especially not fun when someone prints the counters the wrong way around and upside down, what have you. If we could have just a few more people to just get some stuff done, work out where, the 3rd Polish Division is in 1921 when the Soviets are bearing down on them. Doesn't matter. Please feel free to contribute stuff. We will be listening. We want more people to do this stuff with us.
Sure.
Despite when John's looking at Croatian atrocities, or I'm thinking about what the Germans are doing in Belgium. Despite all of that, we do it in some ways because it's fun, because you get that satisfaction of chronicling how all these men work together and put their lives on the line. It's really interesting stuff. So please feel free to get stuck in with us.
This is
very happy for you to join us.
And you know, I'm going to keep this video going a bit longer because I want to say something about that as well now. It's not something I've ever thought of doing. We have a contact us. I can get Geoff onto that list so he can look at email coming in off it as well. Not only do we have a bit of fun doing what we do, a lot of what I do with these games, if you go through the OBs, particularly the more recent ones, starting out probably Singapore, I try and teach people a little bit about reality. Some people have said the games are too complex or too crunchy or whatever. You know what? They are kind of a simulation. That's the whole idea behind them. Plug in the historical decision making, the historical moves, and the game should give you, over time, the historical outcome. That's what we're about. The key thing, though, is you learn an awful lot by playing these games. You find out why some decisions were taken. You find out what's exciting and what's not. And sometimes you have to take decisions under great jeopardy. When you're doing the research, when you're building these games, when you're trying to sell them, when you're trying to explain them, it's not really that different to selling a pint of milk. We all know milk comes from cows or oats or whatever nowadays. Goats, sheep, right? But there's a process it goes through. All these games, exactly the same thing. There's a process we have to go through. I sit and I read about stuff, And I get so angry with some of it, I get very upset with some of it, as you can imagine. Some of it's not nice, but some of it's funny. Some of it's incredibly interesting. Some of it is wide-word decisions that you never realise till you've read 10 books on the same topic and you suddenly get a picture that snaps into place. I know from talking to a lot of people that what we do would interest more people than buy the games. We would really love support, help, input. You know where we are, info@tkcgames.com. Ping us an email. At the moment, I'm so busy doing all kinds of other business stuff. I'm not on the phone all that much, but ping us an email. Yeah. We can ask Andrew to put another email address in this list, Geoff, if you want. If there's one that you would like to put up, maybe get a Hotmail address or something, give it to Andrew. We can get it put in the link down below. We are in a position where we can expand our range, but we need a lot of help to do it. Not because we're not capable of doing it, it's just because we don't have the time, we don't have the manners, we don't have the resources, in other words, to do it. Will you get paid? Probably not. Will you get satisfaction? Definitely. Will you get good training? Yeah. Will you get free copies of the games? Quite possibly. Will you own your research? Yep, but we'll have a license to use it for commercial use. Will you feel fulfilled by it? I hope so.
Will it look good on your CV? Yes.
There's a man talking from experience, right? Can we do stuff to support you? Absolutely. When the company's doing well, you'll get books, you'll get computer systems, you'll get software, whatever it takes to help you do it. So come and talk to us. If someone really knows about marketing and sales and how to run certain bits off it, I'm okay at it, but could really use the help. Geoff's right, get involved. Don't just leave a comment, get in touch, see what we can do to help. Let's make this fly. It's been brilliant, Geoff. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been absolutely phenomenal. We'll catch you in the next one. It won't be so long, by the way. Geoff and I have a lot to talk about in public, and I want to have Bob here in one talking about software with me. I've mentioned that earlier. I'm going to try and get Andrew on. I think it'd be good for him. And when he comes on, guys, be gentle. The guy's a good guy. So have a fantastic weekend. Look forward to seeing you soon. And you know what? If you're having a really good time, try not to get caught. Have a good one. Bye-bye.